We're doing a film project called The American Nightmare, Black Labor, Black Liberation in the Disposable Era. And this was the third installment. And yeah, so Deep Dish has been helping us, kind of giving us skills in terms of videography, and helping us be able to tell our own story, right? And so what y'all saw is basically kind of, it's been the fight, it's been the struggle, and yeah, so that's the context that we have in terms of trying to build the cooperative movement, trying to build something where we are actually in control over our resources and control over our own destiny, right? There's a lot of forces that don't want that to happen. There's a lot of forces that traditionally don't want that to happen, and are actually actively engaged in trying to take control over the city's assets, and cripple us. That's just point blank period. It's gonna pull up this PowerPoint. Okay, so I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Brandon King. I am an organizer with Cooperation Jackson. Cooperation Jackson is an organization that builds worker-owned institutions. We see building, creating space to be able for workers to be engaged and in control of our own labor. It's something that is essential for people, period, for working class people, period. And we're engaged in the political project to ensure that happens. Because our thing is, like, we're not building co-ops just for the sake of building them. We don't have the same orientation in terms of just making profits for everyone to kind of have their profits. Our thing is it's more of a social project. It's more of a transformative project. It's connected to a larger political vision. It's connected to the Jackson-Kush Plan. It's connected to the new African independence movement. And so even in our symbols, there are Indikra symbols. Some of them mean unity, mean cooperation, and mean democracy. And these are things that exist in our culture. It exists in West Africa, which our ancestors came from. And so we hold all of that with us, in terms of what we're building and why we're building what we're building, right? I've been down in Jackson for a little over 2 years. Before that, I lived here in New York City. I was up in New York City for close to 6 years, doing organizing, and I'm part of the Malcolm X grassroots movement. Something that I experienced in being in New York, I felt like, I don't know if y'all feel it too, it feels like a hamster's wheel. It's like a rat race. You're running and you're doing a bunch, you're doing a lot of really, really good work. But what I saw here, I saw that our people are just constantly being pushed out. I see our people constantly being locked up. I see our people constantly being gunned down. And I was like, there are pockets in this country where there is space, where space can be created, and we can build something. I want to see revolution pop off in my lifetime. I want to see social transformation. I want to see us in my lifetime. I want to see us in a better place, right? And from being in Malcolm X grassroots movement, I heard about the work going on in Jackson, Mississippi, with Chokwe Lumumba, with them doing the People's Assemblies after Hurricane Katrina, survivor councils meetings, ways of trying to have people-centered decision-making, right? Ways of people trying to figure out how folks can collectively engage in building, for our own destiny. And I went down a couple times when I lived up in New York to help on Chokwe's city council race, and also when he ran for mayor. And so 2 years ago, he actually won the mayoralship, you know, of the city. And I was like, oh, this shit is really real, you know. And I was like, okay, I'm coming up on 30 now, and like I don't know, I wanna do something. I wanna like, I don't want my life to just be just kind of like passively kind of just allowing or accepting things, you know. I want my life to be, I want to be actively engaged in my own destiny. I want to see real change happen in my lifetime. And for me, I took it up. I was like, New York is so comfortable, you know, like all my friends are here. I'm in my little activist bubble, you know, and you know, I could, you know, it's just a cool place to be, you know. And I feel like in the cities, you know, in Oakland and New York and Philly, like DC, like all of these different places, it's a lot of us there. You know, we're super concentrated in these urban areas, right? And I thought, you know, it might make more sense for us to spread out a bit, you know, to be in places where there aren't many people that speak like, you know, that think like me, or haven't developed to a place where they have, you know. They may think like me, have these thoughts, but haven't been able to express it, because New York is a place you can express and kind of do your thing and nobody really mess with you. But y'all saw from the video, expression down there it's a totally different thing. Expression is resistance, you know. And so yeah, that's why I moved. You know, and it was a political decision for me. It was a personal decision for me. Yeah, and so I'm down there. Most times, like, yo, like with jobs and stuff, you know, it's like 2 years and I'm out. You know, it's like I'm done. The thing that's different about this is like I'm a founding member, and I feel like it's something where I'm engaged in. It's like we don't have a boss, you know. It's like, you know, like that's really cool, you know, like don't have the hierarchy, to be able to like feel like my input, my ideas are like valued, and I'm able to build with folks collectively about like which way forward and like how we see mapping out our game plan, right? And so yeah, I'm gonna go into this PowerPoint. And so yeah, that's Baba Shokwe and Mama Nubia. They're both with the ancestors. These slides I'm going through is basically to kind of ground this presentation, to let folks know that like we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors, and we can't forget them, because they're actually with us right now, working on the other side. So Medgar Evers, you know, folks are familiar with. Harriet Tubman. Yeah, Frederick Douglass. And Brother Malcolm. Yeah, Betty, Sister Betty Shabazz. And W.B. Du Bois. That looks like Nat Turner. I'm from Virginia, so shout out to that guy. Fannie Lou Hamer. We actually have a cooperative, a farming cooperative named after her. It's Freedom Farms. A lot of people don't know Fannie Lou Hamer. After she went to vote, she registered and went to vote. She was a sharecropper, and when her boss found out, they fired her. You know, like they let her go, and so she was like, kind of, ah man, like what do I do? And it was actually the Black co-op movement that kind of took her in, and she was actually a part of a pig farming cooperative called, I think it's Sun something, or I don't know the name. Y'all can look it up. But yeah, so she was engaged in the co-op movement. I feel like a lot of times that history is like disconnected from, like, when we talk about the civil rights movement and we talk about Freedom Summer, we don't talk about like what was the economic force kind of driving and making sure people had food on their plate, you know, and making sure people were able to pay their bills. And that was the Black cooperative movement, the Black farming cooperatives. You know, and I think the thing that's like really real is that like from hearing from people, it's like the stakes were really high. And to hear that people had to like protect their produce from sabotage, armed, because the Klan would go around and burn people's crops. It wasn't only like warfare in terms of trying to kill people. It was also economic warfare. And so like the sabotage, the massacres of communities that wanted to form worker cooperatives, the red baiting, calling people communists and all of that kind of stuff. Those things were intentional and done by the right, and also to know that like the state, didn't really provide any support. Even when they had the National Guard come in, that didn't change the local conditions, of people too much. And so like all of that, like I feel like is like when those contradictions are so stark, it creates a space where people are forced to a certain level of consciousness, and I feel like Mississippi has a certain level of consciousness that I haven't seen in any other place in the country. And I feel like their consciousness comes from their history in dealing with white terror. In Mississippi, it's nothing for people to own guns. A lot of people own guns. I do outreach, and I'm walking up to someone with a flyer, and dude is like cleaning his shotgun in the doorway. It's like that's a new kind of thing for me, and I'm just trying to like act like I'm not freaked out, give my little spiel. But that's just a part of the culture. Like no one says anything about it, but everyone is packing, and I think that's cool. I think that's cool in the sense that it's like folks are real about their situation. It's something that their parents taught them from their history, and so on and so forth. I think the thing that we're tasked with though is like with that history and with that knowledge, how do we engage in ways that are transformative, right? And so yeah, Mississippi also has the highest number of elected black officials in the country, and so with that lets you know that black people are engaged in the political process. Even though that hasn't translated to like any material gains, Mississippi is still the poorest state in the country. Mississippi still has some of the highest health hazards, in terms of like high diabetes, high blood pressure, all of those kind of health risks. It hasn't translated, but to show that like folks have elected black people into office. That gives us hope. So like all of these things, folks assessed and kind of did research, and they came up with the Jackson-Kush Plan. And the Jackson-Kush Plan is kind of the basis for our political project. And Cooperation Jackson is just one aspect of that political project. Our folks, the ancestors. And so Malcolm X grassroots movement. So yeah, so with MXG, self-determination, a process by which a person controls their own life. Very simple. And we're planning to free the land. Some of this stuff I talked about before, just about Katrina and the survival council's meetings being set up afterwards. Mississippi was hit pretty bad as well. Mississippi actually had received the most money from FEMA. A lot of people think it was New Orleans, but Mississippi received the most. The Delta region was hit really hard. Yeah, and y'all know how the media kind of played us, and said we were looting, said we were stealing, when we were just trying to survive. So yeah, so back to the Jackson-Kush Plan. Self-determination is an aspect, participatory democracy, and economic democracy. So this wing right here, the economic democracy portion, that's like what Cooperation Jackson is trying to hold down. The participatory democracy piece, that's the People's Assembly, right? The self-determination is kind of like all of it, but I feel like one of the things that we're trying to do is to engage our communities in ways of self-governance. You know, so for me that looks like no police. You know, for us that looks like, you know, how can we have conversations with elders and with young people to work out our differences. A lot of it, I think, has to deal with economics. You know, and like when folks are out of options, you know, what do people do? And people not understanding that, you know, and so I feel like if we have this can, you know, that would give us confidence. That would give us confidence, and that would stop us from preying on each other. Yeah, and I feel like that can help to shift things. I feel like that's one of the reasons why we kind of started with that. So yeah, People's Assembly, independent politics, and solidarity economy. And so like, just one thing I wanted to say with the People's Assembly, it's been a vehicle that has been able to, we've been able to like kind of groom candidates and like kind of vet folks and prepare people to be able to be on the city council, to be able to run for mayor, but to engage in a way that like you have a crew, you have a community that you're accountable to. You know, you don't make decisions by yourself. You know, that's the thing we're trying to shift up and switch up, is that you know, this governing process, you know, the state has its ways of operating, you know, but we can intervene and we can and we can do things in a way that makes sense for us, you know. And so like part of that is setting up a way that we have a people-centered process of decision making, you know. And so people's assemblies are that. It started in Ward 2 when Chokwe was a city council member, and then it went citywide when he became mayor. And so we still hold people's assemblies meetings. One kind of thing that happened is with this whole fight back with the Confederate legislation stuff, it caused a lot of groups to kind of come together. We formed a coalition for economic justice, and some of the same heads that are part of the People's Assembly are part of the coalition. You know, and I think that's one thing that's really cool though about Mississippi. Folks are really down to throw down when reactionary forces kind of like try to come. I think the thing that we struggle with is the building part and building together. It's kind of like we know our enemies, you know, and we have a strategic alignment around that, but it's kind of hard for us to kind of build together, and we're working on that. We're trying to build. Yeah, so like, yeah, solidarity economy. You know, think about that. It's like, you know, whatever we take out of the earth, you know, we want to put back into the earth, and we want to put back more, because we know the earth is damaged. It's super damaged, you know, just from the climate change, you know, and just from the extraction and the exploitation that has been happening. And we know that we can operate in a way that affirms life, you know, in a way that works well for people, for us, and for the planet. And we're trying to engage in economic enterprises in a way that is sustainable. You know, and this is global, right? You know, folks, I was in Chiapas for a while, and I saw this chart in Spanish before I even seen it in English. You know, so this thing is global. Okay, so yeah, solidarity economy, you know, that's the vision. Cooperation Jackson is the vehicle. Economic democracy is the objective. So yeah, so with this was like our basic kind of game plan. It's been kind of 2 years and some change, and it hasn't mapped out the like this, it's been uneven levels of development, right? So we got a federation of co-ops. I'm gonna go into it in a couple different slides. Co-op incubator. So that's like if folks in the neighborhood come up with different ideas about co-ops that they want to form, we can help them to develop their co-ops. Movement school, we've been doing political education, learning about dialectics, learning about, history, and learning just kind of how can we think, how can we learn how to engage in the world and learn how society works and how things change over time. Because if we know that, then we can better intercede and interject, right? And so that's something we've been doing. The financial institution is something that we also want to build towards. And with the federation, every co-op kind of puts in resources back to the source. So the hope is that when we are at a position where our co-ops are at scale, workers in the co-ops can take out loans, if they need to, to be able to support themselves. But yeah, because we were thinking like credit unions could be that thing, but credit unions are acting way more like banks nowadays, and so it might be something totally new that we create or think up, because the credit unions are being more and more regulated, and more told like to kind of act like banks. Okay, and so so this is kind of what we got going. I'm currently an anchor for Freedom Farms Urban Farming Co-op. So I'm a farmer DJ. Yeah, for me, like this is my first time kind of like growing food, and it's really cool to see something that comes from seed, like into like cabbage or into like kale, and I never thought that I would have like a super like connection to like plants, and cause like one time I was like watering our mustard greens, right? Watering the mustard greens, and the mustard greens kind of like they perk up, like after you water them, and I was like, whoa, this is cool, So it's like they're like my babies, and so like that thing that existed within me that I've been disconnected to, like I'm back connected to it, being down in Mississippi, and being on the land and having my feet in the soil, like all of those things. I feel like it's a spiritual aspect to it too, right? So Freedom Farms. Then we have Nubia. See, because these two are actually two different co-ops. We need to update these slides. But anyway, so Nubia, we have Nubia's Place. Nubia's Place is a catering and cafe cooperative. So right now they've been doing a bunch of catering, and they're trying to get all their licenses and all that kind of stuff clear with the city in order to run fully in the Lumumba Center, which is the center that we have. And Freedom Farms, we have a plot in the back of the center. And the food that we grow goes to serve Nubia's Place. And we also have a recycling and composting co-op that's called Mississippi Waste Alternative. And so basically to set up Freedom Farms, we grow the food goes to the cafe, whatever refuse that happens from the cafe goes to the recycling and composting. Compost goes back to the farm, right? So for us, it's a co-op ecosystem. That's what we're trying to create, right? Like a closed wheel. And we also have Revolutionary Resonance Arts and Culture Cooperative. That's something that draws people into the Lumumba Center. We do different programming, film screenings. We have like different talks. We do like open mic. We have like kickbacks, where we play music, reggae nights. It's really cool, and so like people are drawn to the center to buy stuff at Nubia's Place. So it kind of works that way, we're all supporting each other. I'm gonna pass this sign-in sheet around so everyone, if you didn't sign it, go ahead and sign it. So yeah, so that's the setup. So yeah, so you got the Lumumba Center. I was trying to mix Nubia and Lumumba. You got Lumumba Center, you got Nubia's Place, and that's us. We were taking some mulch, actually kind of expropriating some mulch from from another place to go for our beds in the back. So yeah, so kind of the first phase of the Lumumba Center, we have the plot in the backyard of the Lumumba Center, but we also own a couple vacant lots in the city, and we're converting those over to urban farming plots. And some of the houses, like some of the buildings have structures. Instead of like just tearing them down completely, what we hope to do is to convert them into greenhouses in the first phase, and then a bit further down the line, we want to convert it into cooperative housing. But that's once we get more capital to be able to make those moves. So yeah, so right now, folks that are members of our co-op, they consume the greens, that we grow. And also folks locally, people part of the Coalition for Economic Justice. We have meetings every Monday. If they want some greens on Monday, they can get some greens from us. Local and regional consumption. We actually, we sold food for the first time. We sold our greens for the first time at a local, it's called Cash and Carry. It's like a local produce store, but they don't a lot of times have fresh, naturally grown, like no pesticides, no herbicide. They don't normally have that, right? And so we were able to sell that locally because you have to go like way far out and you have to drive in order to get fresh organic produce. And our stuff is organic. We didn't use anything. We can't call it organic because calling it organic, you got to go through the USDA and you got to have it certified and all that kind of stuff. That's the thing about the state, right? They, national consumption. The reason I'm up here is to share with y'all about what we're doing, and if folks want to engage and figure out how we can partner in any kind of way, then we can do that in terms of with the Greens. Oh, and we're also a part of the National Black Food Justice Alliance, and so with that alliance, it comes us building with other black farmers in the country, and learning from them, and them learning from us, and also sharing in terms of like how can we cooperatively, help to elevate like all of our projects. Okay, and so with Nubia's Place, there's a couple different aspects. So the cafe is in the center, and let me think. Okay, so I think this is just one thing in itself. These right here are part of Revolutionary Resonance. We didn't have that name when we came up with this PowerPoint, but Revolutionary Resonance Arts and Culture Cooperative is a co-op that's formed, and we've been the ones doing the kickbacks. We've been the ones doing the open mics. We've been the ones doing the audio, visual tech. We've been the ones doing the filming with Deep Dish for the American Nightmare Film Project. All of those kind of things, and also too, our hope is because there are a lot of dope artists that are in Mississippi, and I think a problem is with a lot of artists is exposure. And so our thing is how can we help to elevate, or help to get more people to know about the cool artists that are in Mississippi. And so that's another thing that we've been working on. Yeah, and so recycling and composting co-op. So Mississippi Waste Alternative, that's what it is. We recently just bought a truck, and the truck is really cool because we use it for the farm, but we also use it for the composting. And so the first phase of this, actually, they're forming a landscaping co-op, you know, because it's really cheap, low maintenance in terms of like all you need is, you know, a weed whacker, a lawnmower, and the hope is to get all of the trimmings, you know, that collect all of the trimmings from farming. I mean, see, I'm a farmer. From collect all the trimmings from cutting the grass and stuff, and use those trimmings to convert it into compost. And we have a site already designated, you know, that we own that is going to be our compost site. And folks are learning like the levels in terms of how hot, you know, the compost needs to be in order to break down and all that kind of stuff. So we're on our way with that. Yeah, so the Sustainable Communities Initiative is also a part of, you know, what we're building. Thing that's super different here than super different in Mississippi than here is that we actually, with little resources, are able to own land. And you know what we're doing is putting all of our land into community land trusts, and the hope is to take the land and the housing off the market, and to make it collectively owned, you know, where there's a lease for 99 years. And you know, that helps to stabilize and make sure that the community is able to stay there. And so that's a part of our plan. We have some folks that are engaged in, I know they've changed their name, but I know them by the National Community Land Trust Network. We're part of that, and folks are teaching us kind of like how to set up community land trusts. And so, you know, we see these co-ops as a way to have a work-live community and like to create an eco-village. You know, the co-ops are in the community, they are in the neighborhood. Our farming plots that are outside of the Lumumba Center are in the neighborhood. And the thing that's really cool is like people see us working. Sometimes folks come out and they help, you know, or sometimes they're like, you know, keep up the good job, you know, keep up the good work, you know, and they see that it's something positive for the neighborhood. They see that it was super blighted, and you know, you got like needles and stuff from folks using. You got like, you know, beer bottles and stuff like that, and you know, the completely transforming space, like that does something for people's consciousness. That does something for like, you know, it makes you like a happier person, you know. It's like when you clean your room, you know, you can think, you know, I feel like it's the same kind of way in the neighborhood. If it's like real kind of like not together, it affects your mood, you know. And so we're transforming the neighborhood, you know, and people can see it happening. Yeah, and so our vision is that like people who are engaged in Cooperation Jackson, or engaged in who live in our area that we designated, that are part of the Sustainable Communities Initiative, live in an eco-village. And in an eco-village, folks can have access to cooperative housing, folks can have access to like retrofitting and solar energy production. Everyone, you know, can have like the compost set up in their backyard, and also have like a little plot. You know, and if you're asking like why we're thinking in these kind of ways, it's like basic, it's like survival. You know, we know that the state is perfectly fine with killing us, so we have to build up. Hey. Yeah, so we have to build up to be able to have all the things that we need. But yeah, Rukia just walked in.
Hey everybody.
But yeah, so that's so the build up to be able to have everything that we need, because we know that if we relied on them, we'll continue to die. And so yeah, so that's kind of why we have the eco village set up. That's why we're growing our own food, and we're learning how to work together, you know, and to work together in a way that isn't hierarchical, in a way that isn't you know, like those destructive ways that we've learned. You know, we're trying to break down and decolonize. Okay, so yeah, I talked about that. So I don't know if y'all know, Kali is a comrade of ours, and he says that you got to see something 3 times in order for it to kind of stick to you. And so he did this, like, he made like the same slides in a bunch of different kinds of ways. So like the repetition is on purpose. Okay, and so you got Nubia's Place, you got the daycare co-op. So the daycare co-op hasn't popped off yet, but what we have done is made sure that like whenever we have public events, we have childcare available, and also we have a principle at the Lumumba Center that children are welcome in any space. And so it's nothing for like at a meeting, you know, to see kids running around yelling and screaming and having fun and talking, because we feel that like if it's important for us to be in the space building, it's important for them to be in the space as well. And if they're not even paying attention, they're going to pick up things subconsciously, and it's going to affect their consciousness. And I feel like that's something that U.S. culture, it isn't popular. I know I've seen it in Latin America. I've seen it in other spaces where children are in spaces, but we're trying to bring that, you know, or like revitalize that in Jackson. But yeah, Rukia, did you wanna kind of?
Okay. So just thank you for coming to this. I'm Rukia Lumumba. I'm the daughter of Shokwe and Nubia Lumumba. You know, we took that journey from New York many years ago in the 80s to Mississippi because my family had a vision, my father had a vision of creating a more just community and society, and felt like Mississippi was the place where we could do that. At the time, it was an area with the most black counties, and so it was easier to realize a new community that was really rooted in the people who were most oppressed. And so we journeyed there and began our organizing. And as a result, and I'm sure Brandon has already mentioned it, you know, we've come to where we are, where he ran for mayor in 2013, became mayor 2013, and my brother is now running for mayor. He announced on Thursday, and his election will be in 2017. Cooperation Jackson and the Kush Plan is really the reason that he ran, and it is the root of what we're trying to create. It is an example, a model that we hope can be really implemented across the world and built upon and evolved. It's something new for us. It's something that we also are taking as much advice around as possible as a community effort, and we hope it could be inspirational to you all and that you can help us to build it.
Cool. So the policy stuff, the Our Power campaign, that's with the Climate Justice Alliance. And so Climate Justice Alliance is a group of different organizations from around the country that are engaged in fighting climate change, and doing it from the grassroots. You know, the grassroots perspective of communities of color and indigenous communities. So that's a part of it. We've been working on the Clean Power Plan. I'm not really too into that, but it's like we have to, as we saw with this past legislative session, you know, with the right wing, with the, you know, Confederacy basically harping down. If we don't engage in that, they're gonna be able to stop us from even building what we're trying to build. So we have to engage in it, all aspects of our lives, you know. And it's like if you know, and that's why I feel like you know, her brother running for mayor is actually it's like us being real about the different things, the different mechanisms that exist, and how can we engage in it, you know, and affect change in a positive way. Yeah, and so Human Rights Institute, the Jackson Human Rights Institute, last year we were able to get a resolution passed for Jackson to be engaged in a process by making Jackson like a human rights city, so like trying to form a human rights charter. There's a couple cities in the country that are human rights cities. I think there's a city, I think Pittsburgh, and I think there's a couple other cities, but it's a part of that. The International Decade for People of African Descent was actually, we've been pushing that as well through like human rights work. Equity Watch, it's not something that has been done in name, but it's been done in practice with the Coalition for Economic Justice. I don't know if y'all saw, this is kind of local news. One of the guys who's a legislator was on Facebook, kind of, I think he was like watching baseball and drinking too much. But he was typing and talking about how he's gonna create this emergency manager legislation, and how you know, if, you know, the people of Jackson don't get it together, we definitely will. And so one of our folks, you know, got wind of it, you know, and like took a screenshot, and were able to get it out to the local media, right? And so something that happened was that the governor ended up kind of trying to distance himself from that, you know. And this is after the fight. This is after, you know, y'all saw all the stuff that we've been doing, you know. And so yeah, so that was kind of like a small victory. But the thing about us is like we don't want to be on the hills anymore, like and kind of reacting to the things that they kind of put forth to us. We want to kind of know, we want to be on top of it. And so that's kind of, the Equity Watch is something we've been doing in practice, and we have people that are watching them closely. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, so like co-ops in any co-op that isn't a utility co-op or a agriculture co-op is illegal in Mississippi. Yeah, yeah. So you only can form agriculture co-ops or the utilities. So like that's your electric bill. The electric companies don't operate like co-ops. They kind of cut off their membership, and like whoever is the board, they kind of stay the board and they stay making money and they stay doing their thing. We're the folks from the Federation of Southern Cooperatives are engaged in trying to fight that and trying to make the co-ops actually work, the utility co-ops actually work like co-ops. And also trying to pass legislation to expand the definition of co-ops in Mississippi. We've actually figured out a way to kind of work through to be able to make sure all of our co-ops are under our co-ops. We put Freedom Farms as kind of like the head co-op, and it's an AAL. It's like an agriculture something legal. And that thing we're able to put, you know, we are able to put Nubia's Place and Revolutionary Resonance and Mississippi Waste Alternative and our nonprofit Cooperation Jackson of Mississippi, all of that stuff under that, you know. And so we have some folks from the Federation that are working with Federation of Southern Cooperatives that are working with us to help us get all our legal kind of paperwork together to be able to do that. So yeah, it's cool that we've been able to figure that out, but it sucks that we have to figure that out, right? So yeah, the Human Rights Charter, human rights, workers' protection. We've been doing a lot of stuff trying to build with the local unions. We've also been supporting the Fight for 15. campaign in Mississippi. Because, back in the days, like in the 20s, like unions and co-ops were like, they were tight, and, nowadays it's not that way, but we're trying to build and strengthen those relationships. And this past May Day, we had a big kind of union co-op celebration, and trying to uplift that history and also uplift the history of May Day. Because a lot of people in the U.S. think that Labor Day is like Workers' Day, but like International Workers' Day is May Day. And yeah, educating the folks about that history. This is cool. Yeah, trying to get public transportation, community benefit agreements, all of that kind of thing. Mississippi, it's a right-to-work state. You have unions, but you still don't have collective bargaining rights. It's just like, that's really weird to me, because I lived up here. And ecology, so like zero waste and renewable energy. So like us trying to work, build our city towards being that and working in that way. Yeah, so that's a picture from the May Day this past year. So that's the presentation I got. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
I have a couple questions. I'm wondering, do you have an idea of, in total, how much land you have in the community land trusts at this time?
Yeah. We have close to like 15 plots so far.
I don't know how much that is, like in terms of acres or.
Yeah, we'll have to get back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Alright,
just
that's
know
okay.
if our plots just,
Yeah.
That's okay, thank you. And then another question I had was, what is going to be the link as far as making sure you have, it sounds like there's a concern that because of the larger political climate or the broader political climate of these Confederate attacks, that there's some concern that you guys could become vulnerable. And so I'm wondering, what is the plan for lack of a better word, infiltrating at the state level, or making sure that you guys are doing what it takes to change the policies at the state level?
And I think that's a really great question. So right now we have a long strategy, right? A strategy that includes many different components. So one is really making sure that we have a national community that is watching and paying attention and supporting us. Making sure that it's being publicized what's happening. A lot of times we have a hard time showing what's happening in Mississippi. It gets ignored over and over again, and so we're really trying to push that, because the more eyes are on Mississippi, the greater protection we can have. The other strategy is one, running, people for office. So my brother, running him for mayor, but we're gonna have to look at that more too. And once we get that victory, because we learned a good lesson, in 2013 and in 2012 when we tried to run several people at the same time for office in different positions. We didn't have the capacity to do that, right? And so we're trying to do it more succinctly this time, really using our capacity. And so running him and then looking and seeing what is our next step in terms of electoral politics. The other piece of that is, and one of the most important pieces of that is really organizing in Jackson, right? Organizing folks in Jackson and then spreading out in the greater Mississippi areas, right? And so greater Jackson areas and Mississippi counties, right? The work that's happening right now is not just by Cooperation Jackson folks, it's by allies, by people in the community who are really tired of being in this place. Mississippians have, and I'm not going to lecture, but I'll just say this, they have been resisting oppression for many, many years and have been really standing up to like the weight of war that has been waged on their communities, right? Over and over and over again. And they are just, constantly looking for people to back them so that they don't have to be fearful that their property, that their land, that their bodies are going to be snatched or harmed or, subjected to violence. And so the more folks that we galvanize together, even within Mississippi, because people in Mississippi are some strong folks. They are freaking amazing, I'm telling you. They're coming out and they're ready. They're ready. And it's a time, it's a time where people have been through so much over the past years that they're like, I do not want to go through this. So we're really trying to take advantage of this time, take advantage of this energy, right? And continue to move people forward and have concrete things for us to do. So not just saying that we're going to have a legislative policy, but actually attacking the legislation that is coming out, being mindful of what's happening, what legislation is on its way to coming out. So building those relationships with folks who have an understanding of that. And we've done that across, all the way up to the federal level, to the local level. And so really being concrete in our policy initiatives. And so Brandon probably talked about a number of them that we were working on to defeat some legislation that has come up. I hope I answered that question. I hope it's helpful.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, kind of related, I guess. Would you mind going through the process of getting it started up? It sounds like Freedom Farms was the main one. It's really exciting to have all these other ideas coming out of it, but just sort of how did you go from, working with the community to getting, the thing started? And then I guess the second would be what was your biggest obstacle in that path?
Okay. Well, yeah. So Cooperation Jackson wasn't even supposed to be around. It was supposed to be something that while Baba Chokwe was in office, that we would incubate and that we would kind of build out to scale, kind of relatively quickly from having access to the city. And when he passed away, that was whoa, we kind of gotta shift gears a bit and kind of figure out what we're gonna do. And what we knew that we wanted to have a vision that's kind of comprehensive and not just do one thing. And we thought that if we have land, the easiest thing and the less money you need for startup is farming. And so all you need people, you need seeds, you need hoe, and you can expropriate mulch. and so that's what we did. We started with Freedom Farms. We bought the Lumumba Center. It's a space. And from there we started to build out. All of the different co-ops are forming at the same time, and we have different anchors for each of the different co-ops. But the one that you see more visible now is Freedom Farms, because we were able to plant our stuff, and stuff is growing now. But the other ones are working too. Nubia's Place, they did the catering for this event, and a bunch of the different unions chipped in to pay for the food. So that's kind of how it's been working, and people will call Nubia's Place to ask them to cater, and they will use our space to rent out the Lumumba Center for different events. For our allies. But yeah, so we started there, and it kind of formed the folks who were part of building for the Jackson Rising New Economies Conference. Those were the same. That was the basic people who formed Cooperation Jackson.
So I would just say, because I think that conference too really was an important point in developing Cooperation Jackson, is having the conference to galvanize more allies, funding. In order to buy the Lumumba Center, it helped to create that, so that strategy around competency building. And then the other thing I was going to mention is I lost my train of thought. So I won't mention it.
I wonder if you've made any contact or thought of making contact with Bernie Sanders' campaign, and let me say why. One reason is, if you want that much national publicity, Bernie needs to get more connected to the black community, but I think he's more ready than any of the other at that phase. And also, if he wants to continue, if he's really sincere, he will continue his political revolution after, right? And he's raised a ton of money, and he could continue that for projects. such as yours. So I think it's really important for more and more left projects such as yours that are so vital to showing us a different way of living, to put pressure there from in the work you do with the national pressure.
It's definitely something for us to consider. Thank you. Now I remember what it was.
Sure.
It was the international piece.
Okay.
I mean, so I think way back, even starting from Katrina, the work we were doing around Katrina, we began to strengthen our international connections. And Khalid, Brandon, and a number of other folks continue to really strengthen that even during the administration. And then really taking hold of that afterwards to say, and so building sister cities, like Venezuela and a number of other places where they were providing us resources to Jackson, and that was really helpful.
Yeah, we have a strong connection with the Afro-Venezuelan network, and their folks are in New Orleans. They're in the embassy in New Orleans, and they come up occasionally, and we do different events together. And I think the International Decade has made a space, for us to be able to engage in that kind of way. Also, too, we had an intern. We had someone from the MST come in, and they spent 3 months with us. Y'all know how to turn this off? Turn the blue screen off? Never mind. It's cool. And so a lot of the farming stuff that I learned from a guy from the MST. Doing the using the hoe, and my hands are all blistering because I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And he has his stature and just the way you do it, and it makes it a lot easier. And just kind of his style and kind of way that he orients himself and the way that he lives his life. You can tell that he's a farmer. And he goes to sleep early, wakes up early. I go to sleep late, wake up early, and disgruntled because I'm up early. So that's cool. We have that base, and we have that connection still. And he's still sending us materials, still sending us different kinds of things that can help our project. And also too, we're trying to learn from him, just with the coup that just happened. What does that mean for them? Is there different ways that we could support that kind of thing? So those international connections, are definitely there.
So first of all, I'm from Mississippi.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I really appreciate what you guys are doing. And I think you're right in saying that we have a strong history of resistance and fight back. We're some of the strongest people, I think, in the country. But there's also a deep sense of apathy, I think, and especially the Black community in Mississippi. I'm from the Delta, so I think it's very strong there. And so I was wondering if as in your attempt to organize, I was wondering if you've had any resistance in our own community, and how have people been receptive? Have people pushed you away?
Yeah, all of that. All of that. I mean, I feel like the apathy is like a coping mechanism for despair. You just feel like nothing is gonna happen, right? But I don't think that that's how people really feel. People really want change. For me, I'm real change takes time. And so if people see us and see the consistency, and we remain open and don't, if someone isn't messing with us today, but they may mess with us tomorrow, then that's cool. If they mess with us, and so being open. And I feel like that's really important, because there have been folks that have been nah, I don't even want to deal with any of that, and those are the same people that put our flyer on their door, and let other people know that we have a work day, happening for the farm. Those same people that when I first came up to their door, it was what the hell is this, Who are y'all? Lumumba people, that's what they call us. you know, but folks are warming up, you know, because it's like we're new and like that, you know, they've seen people and like folks have been sold so many wolf tickets by, you know, these nonprofits, by, you know, all of these different groups that come in and claim to be about the community and claim to be about doing stuff, and they think that we're the same thing, you know, and so we got to show in practice, you know, that we're something different, you know, and I approach organizing different than I did in New York, because for me it's not about the numbers, it's not about like getting people's contact and stuff. I live there. You're gonna see me. You know what I'm saying? And so it's more so about building connections with people. I'll sit on the porch with someone and we're not even talking about anything related to Cooperation Jackson nonprofit. We're just building. You know, they're telling me stories. You know, that's how I approach organizing now. Because those same people that we share conversations about our lives. You know, in the long run, you know, they're gonna come to an event later on. You know, I know they will, or they're gonna buy our produce, or they're gonna tell someone about us. You know, and that's how it happens. You know, Jackson is not that big of a city. You know, and so when we make an impact, you know, we may think that it's small, but it reaches out and people talk. You know, and your neighbors, they talk to each other. You know, and the folks in West Jackson, they definitely know about us, and I feel like they have a positive kind of view of us. Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, I saw Hollis, and it's always a good day when you see Hollis.
Nice, right?
That was nice. Do you have a toolkit that you share
A toolkit?
to start in other communities to replicate?
Not yet.
Not yet. That's a good idea, though. That's a good idea, though. I mean, I would say the first thing, though, is to make the assessment. I think what Baba Shokwe, Kali, and a bunch of folks did, like, in coming up with the Jackson-Kush Plan, that was really them making the time to assess, like, what makes sense, you know, for Mississippi, but also, like, for the Black Belt South. You know, like, how, like, where's the most strategic place to move? Where's the most strategic place to work? And what are the conditions? And what are the openings? What are the gaps? You know, these are the things I think people should do before they just say we're going to build a project like, you know, Cooperation Jackson, because I feel like it's important to do the homework, because your conditions may present like different kinds of projects that you need to do. You know, because I feel like everything doesn't have to look the same, but y'all could definitely take from, you know, different things that I'm a person about decentralization and not about having models. You know, because models are like, you know, but we have a vision and we have something that is cool, but I don't think it's particular to our local conditions. Yeah.
And I mean, just to go back, so Brandon may not like models, but we are a model, right? So we go back, we're a model, right? And I would just say, like, it took us a long time to get here. I mean, before even 1988, when we moved to Mississippi, there was a process that folks went through to map out and to see what is needed and necessary to, like, realize this. And so I think the assessment piece is really critical. And the benefit of this is that we have all this modern technology that allow that process to happen a lot faster than it did for us throughout those years. But I do think there are definitely components that we can create and make into like a guide, a toolkit of like some best practices, best things, you know, like, you know, working with MST, there are a lot of things we learned, right? We need to share that, you know, with folks. And so I think that's it.
Yeah, I think it was your presentation last year, you mentioned there's like a tradition of co-ops in that region already there, and I'm just wondering how that's impacted, how that fits in with what you're doing and how.
Yeah, it's been cool. I mean, a lot of the co-ops are farming co-ops, so, and I think the way that they're set up is it's kind of like in production and like making sure that their produce, they sell it collectively in bulk. You know, and they're like goat farmers, you know, and a bunch of different kinds of farmers. And so the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, those are the folks that have been providing us support, you know, with us figuring out the co-op law, you know, and to be able to to be able to operate as a co-op in Mississippi with all of the different stuff that we're trying to do. So they've been supportive. I think also too, Jessica Gordon-Nimhart, her book Collective Courage. We started a study group on that book, just so our folks can have a basis, and we learned a lot about co-ops in Mississippi from reading that book. Yeah.
I have two questions. The first is, what will the Human Rights Charter bring you that you don't have already? The second is, Brandon, you made reference to the idea of making a shift recently from being kind of in the hills or in reactive mode to being more proactive. So my question is, like, when did that shift take place for you, and how has that been going?
So the first question?
The first question was the Human Rights Charter.
Human Rights
What
Charter.
will that bring you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. What we hope that it'll bring us is an opportunity to create more laws that protect, the rights of folks, right? And so it's a start. We'll see, right? Like, honestly, but it's a space for us to use to create more laws that'll protect us, that'll create more protections for us. In terms of the second question.
Yeah, so with the second question, so with the Coalition for Economic Justice, two things that they're asking for is to boycott the different counties, the surrounding counties of Jackson, because those are the same counties that are like trying to take the city, and also to a Buy Jackson campaign. The Buy Jackson campaign is important in terms of, like, when we talk about reactive, and building something collectively and building something that is like ours, and getting other people to support Jackson locally. That's a part of, I think, the not being reactive part. That's just the part of, like, building anew or building collectively. I feel that through the coalition, people are engaged. They come to the center every Monday for these meetings. Some of those folks have trickled into Cooperation Jackson, and are engaged in building new economies. I feel like that's the way I've seen it. Yeah.
Can you just ask it one more time?
Yeah.
I'll make sure I get to it.
My question was, you referred to the shift from playing defense or being in reactive mode and towards being more proactive. What does that look like, and how is it going for you?
Oh, I mean, so, like, just having watchdogs, having folks kind of monitor the different the people that hold the seats. Also, we have some progressive legislators that, like, are in these different conversations, but making sure that information, that intelligence is shared amongst the collective. Those are different things that we've been doing. I think we were hit really hard, like really fast, and so we're not gonna make that mistake again, and so we want to be on top of it. And I think what I told y'all about us taking a screenshot, that's a byproduct of folks being on top of it. And so we hope to remain that way.
And in terms of, like, I think what we see, one thing that we see is that we see more people getting involved, right? Like, coming out because they're having a better understanding of what's happening. I mean, for so long things were kind of being dealt with behind closed doors, and like, a lot of things we wouldn't find out to until it's already happened.
Right.
Like,
Right.
and community wouldn't find out. We
Right.
wouldn't be the only people, just in general, community wouldn't find out.
Right.
And so now we have more, trying to make sure that we have more intel and can give it to community early on, and that we can know so that we can move forward.
Yeah, and I feel like another thing too that we were pretty successful in is in controlling the narrative. We came up with the slogan Confederate Spring. And that's something that it's kind of like a play on words, like the Arab Spring, like that kind of stuff, right? But we did that intentionally. We did that on purpose. And that was to break up, to divide the right. You know, there's some folks who are racist, right? But they don't want to, I'm not that racist, you know, like I don't, you know, and so it divided them amongst their ranks, you know, and which is a positive for us, right? And we got the local media to take that on, you know, and you know, that culminated into national media, you know, taking that on. Rolling Stone, Vice Magazine, like a bunch of different places talk about, you know, what's happening in Jackson, what's happening in Mississippi. A thing that they tend to leave out is the fight back.
Yeah.
You know, it's always really horrible things happening in Mississippi, you know, and that's what they say. But they don't talk about the fight back, or if they talk about the fight back, and a lot of times it's in the ways that it's like, oh, these scary black people are gonna take over, you know, you know, and it's like, you know, so it's like we gotta be kind of real about kind of like how the national media portrays us and portrays our story, and so I feel like that's why it's really important for us to develop the skills to be able to tell our own story, and that's what we've been doing or trying to do.
How does the coordination happen between, I guess, between the co-ops and also between the co-ops and like the direct action and activist kind of work that you guys are doing as well? Like how do they feed into each other?
Yeah, so it's like have a calendar. So like I mean, so every week we do kind of co-op development stuff. We have like a staff meeting where we kind of map out how the week is gonna look. There are different kind of fight back stuff happening if we need to support Fight for 15, or you know, if we're pointing to local unions fighting the furloughs, you know, that kind of stuff. But also working on pro formas, working on business plans, watering the farm, you know, like tilling, you know, making sure the plants are good, like all of those different kinds of things. Working on the video. Editing.
Well, does each co-op have its own structure as well?
Yeah, I mean, so they meet weekly. They meet weekly, and in those weekly meetings, they, you know, kind of figure out how they're gonna do what they do. Yeah, and each co-op has an anchor, and that anchor is responsible for kind of making sure the meetings are convened, and folks are working through what they need to work through.
So like, and also just making sure that we're mixing the organizing that work, the policy work, with what we're doing in the cooperative. So like we're all engaged in that work. Like it's not like separate.
Right. Yeah. And another thing too is because each of the anchors are also staff members, right? And so we do, or like, you know, we do report backs, you know, and like kind of do sharing, you know, to see where, so we're not working in silos, you know, so that we're engaged in making sure that like we can support each other, you know, where it makes sense for us to support each other.
I'm just curious, just because there was one thing you were saying, Brennan, about the different pockets when you were talking about when you moved down to Mississippi. Like, it was just reminding me of stuff I've heard colleagues say about, you know, like, you know, the way you fight in a medium-sized city that's not part of the global economy is different than the way you fight in New York City. But there are still sometimes pockets, as I was thinking about, like, so I was thinking about like East New York, for example, right, as like a pocket to kind of experiment and do stuff. And I'm thinking about the social forum being in Detroit and like how they have a, you know, so I was thinking about those two places and wondering if you saw any value or already have relationships with these areas. The other thing and the other part is just on the community land trust. I'm pretty sure you guys are already involved with the Homes for All campaign.
Yeah.
So I was just curious if you could speak a little bit more about that too. So those two.
Okay. Yeah, so East New York, yes. Crystal House, there's a project of the Malcolm X grassroots movement that also, they engage in farming, but I think it's primarily like a space for houseless LGBT youth of color, black youth. Yeah, so that's like a pocket. Folks are experimenting, doing things that we're connected to. Someone from, they used to live in Crystal House, came down to Jackson and is a farmer, and like also helped us figure out how to farm. So yeah, in Detroit, we have an up south, down south connection. There's a couple different groups. EMEAC, East Michigan Environmental Action Coalition. With them, D-Town Farms, Detroit Black Food Security Network. All of those different groups who are like in a similar situation. Like, you know, they got the emergency manager, they have their water taken, they're trying to take our water, they're trying to set up an emergency manager, basically import the same kind of neoliberal BS, you know? And for us, we've been learning from them just about like, you know, what to expect, but also how we can learn from their mistakes, and also learn from their victories too. So that's the thing. I feel like in places that are being like deindustrialized, that is space, you know, for us. We can build anew within that. With the Homes for All, we actually had 2 members go up to the conference in Chicago. You know, and there, folks made a it's like a national kind of plan, plan to kind of get housing, you know, fight for housing, but also, you know, fight the different foreclosures that are happening around the country, but also trying to make sure activists and organizers have skills to be able to learn how to develop community land trust. You know, I feel like, I know in my younger days, or like my earlier days, I wasn't, the whole technical kind of aspects of stuff, I was like, I just want to fight back, like, you know, like we can win, you know, but winning actually takes like developing different skills and also doing things that may be uncomfortable, you know, and learning about business plans and pro formas and all that kind of stuff is not something that I would like, if, you know, if I had my way, like I wouldn't be doing that, you know, but it's what's necessary, you know, and I feel like revolutionaries and living today, like we got to think about like doing what's necessary and not just like what's comfortable. Any more questions? Yeah.
So one of the issues that's come up at the conference in the plenary last night, and it was, you know, women here just raised it, is the relationship between social movements and the electoral process. And I think Chris Hedges last night made a statement saying something like that you know, well, several people said that political movements have to be built outside of the electoral process. And somebody else said, you know, that the Democratic Party has been the burial ground of social movements. And I'm just wondering how you guys look at, you know, the extent to which you are involved in the electoral process in Jackson, and at how that fits into the larger picture of people really questioning the you know, radical social movements getting drawn into that process.
Yeah. Sorry. I mean, so for us, we really want to, we look at, we're people-driven. We perform people-driven campaigns, right? So the People's Assemblies are a major example of that. So the People's Assemblies that we do in Jackson and started to do back when, after Katrina, after the aftermath of Katrina, is what kind of got us to this place in the first place. So listening to the will and the want of the folks, right, that are most impacted, that are in community, we're just the representatives of them, right? And so really making sure that we are speaking to their needs. And so those People's Assemblies are our core, our key, right? And so using that to create a platform, bringing that back to the people, making sure that they are okay with that platform, and then bringing that forward. So even once we, you know, have administration and are in administration, not deciding on our own, like this is what we're going to do first, this is what we're going to do next, but actually bringing that to the people, right? And so like for the short period of time that my father was in office, one of the things that he did that had never happened in Mississippi was actually involve the people in the determination of even how the budget was drafted and prepared, right? And so the people had an opportunity to see, this is the budget, this is what's going on, you know, do you want to push forward with this because you indicated, you know, that infrastructure was your biggest concern. I mean, the people said, like, our water is messed up, our bills are too high, you know, this is what's going on, our streets are poor, like, I can't even get to work because it's a pothole here and here, and so every time I gotta go take my car to the shop to get fixed, and in Jackson we don't have public transportation, right? And so like going on and on and on about like, these are the barriers that you may not see as a barrier up front, but this is what's preventing me from making a living, from going forward. And so using that information, bringing it to the folks and saying, okay, so this is what we propose, is this what you agree with? And using those people's assemblies as those really strong suits, strong forces to do that. But then also, you know, like, when you engage in true participatory like governance, where you really are moving from the will of the people, that means you got to go door to door. That means you got to call. It is not an easy task, and it was a lot of work with little capacity, you know. And so not only doing the people's assemblies, but literally going door to door to make sure that folks have seen the proposals, have learned about it, understand it, and then coming forth. So really engaging in that, and so. The best way, and I know it sounds, you know, idealistic or, you know, hopeful and may not be as concrete as people may want it to seem, but it's really about engaging people. Like, it's about doing traditional organizing, use as well as new organizing tools like social media to make sure folks have what they understand what's going on, can give feedback, can guide us in the process that they want to see happen, can guide us and let us know what they want to see happen. We have to be committed to that. And it's not easy, and there are forces that try to, like, you know, pull us the other way, you know? And when you put people in an administration, you have to make sure that those folks are educated as well and understand that we're no longer looking at this old form of government. We're looking at this new form, and this new form really is going to help create a better reality for all of us. And that's about political education. That means, like, even the administration that we have, people that we have in office, delivering political education and making sure that we have that ability to do that with them as well, right? And so, yeah, I hope that.
Yeah, I think too, in all of this, it's like, it's filled with contradictions, right? Mm-hmm. You know, with the budget thing, MXG, Malcolm X grassroots movement, voted against it. Mm-hmm. You know, because they were like, you know, why do the people of the city have to pay for their own, like, when their resources are being stolen? You know, the reason that the roads aren't fixed is because it's been extracted. You know, their resources have been extracted. So why do they have to foot the bill? You know, and Chokwe, being the mayor, you know, putting on his mayor hat, it's like, this is what we're dealing with. So like, how can we figure this out? You know, so it's filled with contradictions, and like, I feel like, you know, the people's assemblies are spaces where we deal with those kind of things, and people come to their own conclusions about with the information laid out. You know, and the people decided that that's how they wanted to roll. Yeah.
Can you say a bit more about people's assemblies? Like, I understand you have to go door to door, you have to generate turnout and all of that. What's the actual turnout like, and the nature of the conversations that happen in them? How do you facilitate those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, you could talk about. I'll talk a little bit of just off the back. Okay. So like, I mean, turnout is, so the people's assemblies, just like any type of committee meeting, you have some meetings that are well attended, some that are not, right? And it all is about the time, you know, what is the issue at the time? Like, what are people most, you know, rallied up about and want to discuss? And so it depends on that. It also depends on where, right? Like, so the different wards may have different issues, right? And concerns that come up that, so Ward 2 may have a People's Assembly and they're dealing with this issue right now, where Ward 3 is having a People's Assembly and they're, you know, dealing with a different issue that most people are coming to, but there's not a lot of like rallying around like folks want to come. So I mean, in these meetings, it's supposed to be meetings where you come and you talk about what are the particular issues that you want addressed in your community right now at that time, and how you want, what solutions you propose, and then that's supposed to be taken and then given to lawmakers, administration, officials, elected officials.
Right, and with the People's Assembly, there are different people who are head of different task force and different committees, like some dealing with like education, dealing with infrastructure, like just dealing with different things, and so like they're the point people, and so if you have a People's Assembly meeting, like, and we're dealing with education, then one person to be like the head, that'll be the person facilitating that meeting. But if they're not, if the issue isn't about what their particular expertise or focus is, then the person who is kind of steps into that role. And yeah, like so with the airport takeover, turnout was really big, because folks were really concerned. It's like an asset from the city that they're trying to take, and so that was really big, but like things are like around the schools, it's kind of mixed, sometimes the meetings are big and sometimes, around charter, because like I think people aren't educated about like charter schools and kind of what they mean, and so it really depends on like the level of consciousness, also kind of like if it's buzzing, and it's the talk around the town. How the ebb and flow of people engaged. Yeah.
I'm from Toronto, Canada.
Yes.
This is
my mother-in-law.
Oh, nice.
You've given me so many ideas to take back to Toronto. We have an image, I think, in Canada that racism doesn't exist, when it's really sort of like killing our youth. The latest that happened this week was shooting of a black young mother, pregnant, died, and her baby had to be taken. So we have pockets in our community, just like I think in North America, where we have gun violence and we have all the issues I think that you have. So we have a network called the Anti-Black Racism Network, and I'm so pleased to hear your presentation, because it's given me a lot of ideas, I think, to take back to my group. It's based on it's community as well as academics, and what we're trying to do. We have a Black Lives Matter group, and the question that was asked about is a question that comes up in our group as well, and that is the extent to which we work with the powers that be, with government, to make change, and at the same time have our own autonomy, if you will, that runs counter to government policy direction. And so raising that question is always a question of the give and take, the dialectical kind of struggle, if you will, between when we work inside and when we work outside, when we work with governments, when we don't. But your presentation kind of really says to me that there's a lot of room, I think, in between that space for when we work and when we don't work, when we keep that revolutionary kind of banner, if you will, very centered, as we work for change. You give me so many ideas to take back to my group. We have a group that's coming up, young black leadership that we're trying to build, an institute, and so I'm taking back things not just from you but from others, in terms of building that institute with young black leaders in our community. So your models, thank you so much for that. I have quite a lot to take back.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with the running people for office, and I think it's important to be clear about the limitations. I feel like Antar is clear. I feel like Chokwe was clear. I think because we would be fools to think that we can manage the beast, right? You know, and so I think with that position, it's like a position that like you can agitate and you can let people know what's really going on and what's happening, and use that space as a kind of like the bully in the pulpit, you know, to kind of expose, you know, and heighten the contradictions. I think that is something that that folks are clear about, like just in terms of how we're relating to the electoral politics and to the electoral system. One thing that I'm kind of nervous about is that we just found out that the city might be broke. You know, so like, you know, what does it mean to be managing a broke city? You know, and that's something that that might be a challenge. You know, if Antar wins. You know, so like, how do we deal with austerity? You know, and does it make sense for us to be in office dealing with austerity? It doesn't make sense for us to be fighting it from the outside. And, you know, the contradictions that exist, like if he's in office, like how does that gonna affect Cooperation Jackson and how people view Cooperation Jackson if like things aren't going too well in the city, you know, and we're the Lumumba people? You know what I mean? So like all of these different things I think we're sorting out and trying to figure out. And we do realize that we live in a global world and a global economy, and there are folks you know, in other places in the world that are dealing with austerity, you know, and some folks are dealing with it in not so good ways, and some folks are dealing with it in ways that I think make sense for their local conditions. Our goal is to actually try to expose Antar to some of those different places, like in Greece with Syriza, but also in Spain with some different communities that are building and aren't capitulating. And so yeah, so like when, you know, the Chamber of Commerce comes to Antar and it's like, you know, these are your options, and he thinks that these, you know, he will know that that isn't his only option. You know, he know that he has a vast playbook, you know, to kind of go by and to go from, you know, and so this summer that's something that we're also trying to do, make sure that he's able to get out there.
Then also just recognizing that when they come to him with anything, and he knows that this is not a decision that he makes.
He makes, right.
Right, and
right.
so, and I think that's the really important piece of that. We're not trying to create a dictatorship. We're trying to really engage folks in decisions, right? And so, the people center. And so, and he is clear about that, right? He is very clear about that. I mean, people come to him now, and he still says, well, actually, let me take this back. Right? Let me take this back to my people, right? To our people, right? Because you can't make that decision, and that's really, really important. That's critical.
Right.
It's critical.
Right, anything else? Cool. Well, thank y'all for coming.